All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our first Friday webinar. My name is Craig, and I'm the Alberta representative for Northwest Tacuho. I'd like to introduce two fantastic people here we have giving us a great presentation with a lot of really good information in it. We have Elizabeth Trayner and Lori Johnson. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to them and let them begin their presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Trayner, like he said, and I'm the Director of Residence Life and Deputy Title IX Coordinator at Willamette University.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lori Johnson, and I'm the Director of Rights and Responsibilities at Willamette.
So you'll notice that there's a link at the bottom of this page here that has a lot of great information in it, so you may want to jot that down or go back to the recording after we're done here. That Dropbox will have a ton of material on it, and if you have any trouble accessing that, feel free to go ahead and email me, and I'll go ahead and give you access otherwise, but it should be that you can get to that information just by clicking on the link. I want to give a couple of caveats here that we are not lawyers, so this is not legal advice that we are giving here, and this is just introductory material. So the information that we're presenting is based upon numerous day-long trainings and lots of readings and collaboration and research that we've done in order to get to the point that we're at right now, but we are by no means experts in the field, so this is just meant to be introductory material for you. And I also want to acknowledge that while this material is geared towards our American people, there is a lot of overlap with the Canadian Human Rights Act, and there are a couple of articles within the digital Dropbox that speak directly to Canadian laws that are equitable to the laws that we'll be talking about today. I want to start with a quote from President Barack Obama. Sexual violence is more than just a crime against individuals. It threatens our families. It threatens our communities. Ultimately, it threatens the entire country. It tears apart the fabric of our communities, and that's why we're here today. Because we have the power to do something about it as a government, as a nation. We have the capacity to stop sexual assault, support those who have survived it, and bring perpetrators to justice.
This is Lori, and I'm reading a quote from Vice President Joe Biden. Freedom from sexual assault is a basic human right. A nation's decency is in large part measured by how it responds to violence against women. Our daughters, our sisters, our wives, our mothers, our grandmothers have every single right to expect to be free from violence and sexual abuse. And I also want to add that moving toward our responsibility to protect human rights, I respectfully add our sons, brothers, fathers, grandfathers, and our loved ones who are transsexual, intersex, and pansexual.
And I want to acknowledge that how important it is that we're talking about this in so many places across the world right now, and I appreciate our leaders in the government taking a stand and pushing us forward to make sure that we're addressing these topics on our campuses. But I also want to acknowledge our students that have really driven the conversation and have taken it upon themselves to connect with each other across the United States. So a great resource to keep in mind is knowyour9.org, and their work is to be empowering students to stop sexual violence. And we would not even be having this conversation here today if it wasn't for our students who have created this landscape for us to be having these conversations. To give you a little bit of a concept of what we're going to be talking about this morning, we're going to start by talking a little bit about what Willamette is doing. We'll share some statistics and give an overview, a brief overview of Title IX, the JEANNE Act, VAWA, Campus Save Act, OCR guidelines, and the White House Task Force. We'll chat about bystander intervention and the role of race and culture, and then end with what the investigation and conduct process looks like and give you a chance to ask any questions. So if you do have questions, feel free to put those into the chat box at the top of your screen. There should be a bubble that you can click on to type in your questions as we go, and we'll get to those as we have time at the very end.
This is Lori, and I'm going to start off by discussing our Title IX team. You can see these are the folks who comprise that group, which is our Title IX coordinator. We have 2 deputy Title IX coordinators, of which Liz is one, myself, our director of the Bishop Wellness Center, and the director of campus safety. And I would say that our Title IX team developed relatively organically. It's an interdepartmental team that's focused on case management. It assesses resources, policies, and procedures. We assist with the development and implementation of ongoing training, and then we intervene in response to actual and constructive notice of sex and gender bias, power-based personal violence, sexual violence, and stalking. We provide remedies, assess individual and campus safety, and we do our best to do this while treating each individual involved with dignity and respect.
We have a President's Working Group that was put into action this past academic year, and that was in response to an incident that happened on campus largely. That group came together and has members that are students, faculty, staff from across our university. That group was informed on what the process looks like on our campus, what best practices are, and then they came together to create some recommendations out of the education that they received. And those recommendations were put forth to the entire campus community, and leaders on campus were then charged with creating a response to that document, and we're currently working on implementing what our process will look like to respond to that working group. We also have a director of community education on campus who doesn't serve as a member of our Title IX team, but she is absolutely an integral part of our team outside of that meeting. And so she is in a brand new position that started in December and is operating out of the Office of Residence Life. And she's responsible for a number of things, but one of the things that she's been charged with is to implement our Green Dot Bystander Intervention Program. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in our program. And she is the person who's spearheading that, but she also has a team of individuals who work with her to do that. Last summer, we were fortunate enough to host ATICSA, which is the Association of Title IX Administrators on campus, and we trained 60 members of our faculty and staff on campus in addition to about 150 people from other institutions in the nation. And another piece that I just want to point out from our Willamette process is that we have a website and online reporting form, as many institutions do. Our website is something that is included on the back of all of our ID cards, and so that is something that any student, faculty, or staff member who joins our community has access to that directly by looking at the back of their ID card.
On our screen, there's information about statistics, and although there may be discussion about specific statistics, when we look at this 1 in 5 college women will be victims of attempted or actual assault, I've had students and other folks say, if we were in a situation where 1 in 10 students were having their computer stolen, we would see an enormous amount of marshaling of resources to address those types of situations. And so we have those general statistics, and I am confident that we share the desire for no one to be harmed, for no one to be a victim of attempted or actual sexual assault, and that we are committed to providing safer campuses for our students. If we look at the 4th bullet, it highlights what we know is the challenging intersection of young people, high-risk behaviors, and alcohol and other drugs, and the challenges that presents for us on campuses.
And as we look at these statistics, what our jobs are as administrators and as campus communities is we are charged with making sure that we're increasing the number of incidents that are reported on our campuses. We know that these incidents are happening. When you look at these statistics, you know that they're prevalent on our campuses, but by no means do our reporting numbers look anywhere close to these numbers. So our job is to be increasing the number of incidents that are being reported on our campus. Well, at the same time, we need to be decreasing the number of incidents that are actually occurring, and those can be happening through bystander intervention and other prevention programs that we have on our campus. But what we want those numbers to do is we want the numbers of reports to increase, the number of incidents to decrease until they both meet in the middle and those numbers both go down to 0. That's our ultimate goal and what the gold standard would be.
This is Title IX. It is brief for the ramifications it's had and it continues to have on education. Many of us understand Title IX in relation to sex and gender equity in athletics. The dear colleague from 2011 gave us expanded guidance about our responsibilities to prevent and address harassment. Title IX covers all educational activities and provides protections for pregnant, parenting, and married students, gender stereotyping in learning environments, including educational materials, access to study in STEM fields and technology. In addition to that and other aspects, I think it's important for each of us to see ourselves in Title IX, that Title IX says no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from. And that as we are serving as advocates and supporters for our students, we also have the obligation and the responsibility to care for each other as professionals on campus, and even so far as our own individual experience and how it may be covered under Title IX.
The Jeanne CLERY Act came out in 1991 as the Campus Security Act, and over the years there's been a number of various amendments, and in 1998 is when it was formally named as the Jeanne CLERY Act. We have a number of obligations under the CLERY Act. There's a few of those obligations that are listed here on your screen, and this is really where the feds are clamping down right now and fining institutions. We received a tip yesterday from Atixa that they're looking at the first $1 million fine to be handed down soon by OCR. So these are big numbers that we're talking right now. And according to the Sexual Violence on Campus that was put out by Senator McCaskill, that came out on July 9th, so very, very recently. According to that report, 40% of schools have not conducted an investigation in the past 5 years, which blows my mind. And an estimated 63% are not reporting CLERY stats right now. And so when we know that OCR is really coming down hard on our CLERY numbers, that's an easy way for us some low-hanging fruit for us to make some changes on our campus in order to start being within compliance if we're not already in compliance. The Violence Against Women Act is something that came into effect in March of this year. And one of the pieces that was implemented through that was the report of domestic violence, stating dating violence and stalking needs to be included within the CLERY report. That was not previously a part of the CLERY report. And there's a lot of things that we need to be implementing through this act. In April of 2014, the negotiated rulemaking was completed, and we will be having our final regulations that are going to be coming out on November 1st. And these pieces are all included in the digital Dropbox, which you'll find in the chat box as well. The White House task force that I've referred to put out two guidelines on addressing sexual assault and sexual violence on our campuses. The Not Alone document, as well as the FAQs, and both of those, again, are in the digital Dropbox. This really started with the military. They are just recommendations. They're not legislative in nature. And it's important to point out that OCR has never utilized the option, although they have the option, to withhold federal funds in a case. However, none of us want to be the first case where that actually happens. So the White House Task Force looked for innovations to prevent sexual assault and support both victims and those accused. And right now, that information is published that 64 institutions are under investigation currently. The White House Task Force is creating sample climate surveys for us because we know that only 16% of our institutions right now are conducting climate surveys. They're creating sample policy language. They've created a policy checklist for us, and soon they'll be offering a sample MOU because we do need to have a memorandum of understanding that we have in place with our local law enforcement. Bystander intervention is something that we are required to do now through VAWA, the Campus Save Act. And so there are a number of different programs that have been put out by different organizations and individuals. And you can see a few of those organizations that have put together bystander intervention programs up on your screen. And there are pros and cons to each of these different bystander intervention programs, and some institutions have chosen to create their own homegrown options. What we have done as an institution is we've chosen to use Green Dot as our bystander intervention program for Willamette. And I really love the fact that it's built on the premise that no one has to do everything, but everyone has to do something. And I know a lot of you joined this webinar today because you're learning about this topic and it's something that's important to you. And I know far too many individuals that have been harmed, and I love that Green Dot offers a way for us to reduce those numbers of folks that are being harmed on our campuses and in our communities. So if you think about all of the zombie movies that are out there, or any movie that has a terrible outbreak that takes place, there's usually a map with a few red dots, kind of like the one that you see here. And usually it's in Washington, D.C., or maybe it's in Oklahoma or Texas. And there's someone who gives a report and says, Mr. President, if there isn't a cure that's found, it's going to spread, and there's going to be red dots all across the country, just like the map that you see here on our screen. So now, instead of those red dots being something that's a contagious disease or a zombie outbreak, imagine that those red dots represent a single moment in time where someone's choices, actions, and words or behaviors contributes to or tolerates violence in any way. One red dot is just the 3 seconds that it takes for someone to raise their hand to strike someone. One red dot is someone's choice to have sex with someone without their consent. One red dot is seeing someone engaging in some sort of risky behavior, and the choice that they take to walk away and do nothing. That moment of inaction is a red dot. A red dot is just a moment, and those red dots are happening on each of our campuses. So just like those red dots can spread across the campus map, green dots can do the same thing. A green dot is also just a moment in time where a choice or behavior, an action, or a conversation that expresses complete intolerance of any form of violence or makes someone on your campus or in your communities feel safer. A green dot is walking up to a friend and asking them if you can walk them back to their residence hall because they're worried about an ex who's stalking them. A green dot is checking in with a friend who may have had too much to drink at a party and getting them home safely. A green dot is talking to someone you trust on your campus about how to help a friend who's in an unhealthy dating relationship. A green dot is talking to your peers or your coworkers about this issue or tweeting about it, that violence isn't something that we tolerate. A green dot is just a moment in time. And the thing I love about green dot is that we're not asking folks to change their entire lives. We're just asking for 1 or 2 green dots. So I know that we all have some barriers to stepping in. It can be hard to do a green dot, and it doesn't make somebody a horrible person if they don't step in. It may seem like an easy concept, but there's a lot of things that get in our way. We may not want to make a scene. We're concerned for our own safety, and that's a very real concern, which we should always take into account. Sometimes we just don't know what to do, and sometimes we're worried about what others might say or think. And we're not going to be able to make all those things go away. But what we can do is to give you options. So no matter what makes this hard for people, there are green dots that we can do to get around them. So if you're shy, you're not all of a sudden not going to be shy. So you can ask someone else to do something. If you're worried about what others might think, you can leave an anonymous note for someone you trust to ask them to figure out what's going on and so that they know what's happening. If you're not comfortable with confrontation, think about a distraction that you could use by striking up a conversation about something that's totally unrelated. So we're not telling people exactly what to do, we're just asking people to do something. And it might seem very simple in a lot of ways, just like those green dots that we saw on the map. You can be a part of the culture shift on your campus just by making tiny green dot decisions. And so I'd like to challenge each of you to make one specific commitment, not to me and not something that you need to say out loud, but a commitment to yourself of a green dot that you're going to do in the next 24 hours. Maybe it's having a conversation with a friend you've been worried about. Maybe it's a quick status update on Facebook or a tweet. Maybe it's telling someone about their reporting options. Willamette's motto is "Not unto ourselves alone are we born," and Green Dot is just another way for us to be living out our motto. I'm sure there's a lot of ways that you can connect this program or other bystander intervention programs with your own campus. And your green dots can really make a difference in making our community safer for everyone. And the way that we've implemented our program on our campus is through overview speeches, similar to the one that I just shared with you, or they could be longer, they can be an hour or so. They can be done with clubs and organizations, they can be done through classes. We have a number of one-on-one conversations that we have with folks, whether it's over coffee or tea or just chatting with them in a local hangout on campus. We have 6 to 8 hour official bystander trainings that we offer on campus through various opportunities. Sometimes they're focused to specific groups. We did a targeted official bystander training with our Greek folks on campus this spring. And it might be just more a general session that might be with just students or with a group of faculty or staff. We do social marketing on our campus through Twitter and Facebook and through posters and banners. And then we did a instructor training where 18 folks from campus were trained on how to be instructors so that they could be doing those official bystander trainings. It was a 4-day training that we brought in folks from Green Dot Inc. to train us, and those 18 folks are the ones that are doing our trainings for us at this point. And Green Dot is not something that Dorothy Edwards got together with some folks and decided that this is how she wanted to be implementing the program. She did a great deal of research in a number of different fields and brought that research together in order to form Green Dot, and she's continually making changes to the program. So she utilized diffusion of innovation, social diffusion theory, bystander literature, perpetrator data, and also marketing and rebranding research. So pulling in things from our MBA programs and pulling all that together in order to create a comprehensive program. When we're talking about sexual assault and sexual violence, it's important to know that rapists come from all aspects of life. So they come from different backgrounds, ethnicities, races, religions, sexual orientations, disabilities, and socioeconomic statuses. And so there is sometimes a thought that it comes from a specific group, but it really does cut across all backgrounds, according to the Indiana Coalition Against Sexual Assault. However, we do know that when we look at the lifetime rate of those who are being sexually assaulted, that there are some populations that are being harmed at higher rates than the general population. So our American Indian and Alaskan women are being harmed in rates that are twice the number of all of our women. And our mixed race women are also being harmed at much higher rates. So when we look at race and culture and sexual orientation, all those pieces, it's very important for us to be training on race and ethnicity and sexual orientation for all aspects of our communities, that we're looking at our deans and our directors and our department chairs, our hearing officers and conduct professionals, our res life staff, our students. All aspects of our campus community need to be trained on race and ethnicity and the way that these interact with the way that we're being harmed on our campus.
Okay. So just for a moment, I want to reach out to us with CARE as a collective. We are asked to do difficult, new, conflicting, controversial things, and that this causes stress and even fear. And I think back to how I struggled after my first investigator training, that I literally found in my head thinking, would someone just please tell me how to do this? Could somebody tell me how to do this right for our institution? And then, I stopped for a moment and I had a graduate school moment, and I said, I thought of triggering and identity development and the first vector of competence, that when we're in this type of stress, and how often do we really have the opportunity to reflect carefully on what we're doing in our daily practice? And then that doesn't even come to sort of fold in politics and legality and risk. All those things put pressure on us that may lead us to behave in ways and do things that in any other circumstance we would not. And I think that it's important for us to remember that as we move forward looking at dynamics of investigation and adjudication of sexual misconduct cases. We also, when we're working in this area, we're touching people's lives in incredibly significant moments where people may be deeply harmed, that people's lives may be incredibly changed forever. And I'm confident with the professionals I know across our country that weighs heavily upon us. And so the increased scrutiny that we are under as institutions of higher education, as the law, I will use the gentle term, provides us additional guidance, we are sometimes in conflicting expectations, and we have to be ready to be thoughtful, to go beyond just trying to follow what folks are telling us or what is the next thing, and to think deeply and broadly about how we can continue to address these challenges on our campuses in the most right way for our campus and for our students and for our community members. It's important for us to remember that not one of us is determining whether or not a student is guilty of a crime or breaking a law, that we're responsible for the appropriate enforcement of behavioral and ethical codes, and educational responses and responses to keep individuals and our communities safe. I think that in that ongoing onslaught of legalities, we forget, and I see the language being conflicted and confounded, where we frequently are hearing people talking about institutions should not be making decisions about whether or not students have committed felonies. And that's absolutely true, and it's absolutely not what we do. Our list there says pendulum. One of the things that we see happening is there have been movements in our magnificent democratic republic that Liz alluded to, that student concern, student complaint, student activism has pushed us to a place where we know we need to be addressing these concerns on our campuses. And then at the same time, we have pendulums swinging the other way, that as people are being held accountable or being separated from institutions, we're then buffeted by pressure from other directions and concerns for fundamental fairness and students' rights to due process, as well as our staff, employees, and faculty. And all those things impact us. Now, as far as investigations and conduct go, one could have a webinar on each of those topics, and I have no intention of trying to cover all that information. There are some specifics, and I think that it's important for us to remember that we do know how to do this. We do know how to provide fundamental fairness and provide good due process responsibilities. And even before and beyond the times of dealing with sexual misconduct, that when we had students who would have been beaten up, we would have been looking at special support for those students and reaching out to them, making sure they had resources they need, remedies, that they had an opportunity, that no one was going to take away an educational opportunity for them in the classroom because they spent a night in the hospital. We know these things already, but there are cultural dynamics that have made issues of sexual assault, interpersonal violence, sexual violence, and stalking topics that are difficult to manage and bear. And I still say that we know how to manage these issues effectively. There are many checklists out and about, and I know, Liz, we have some in the Dropbox, right? Mm-hmm. And we'll continue to put others in there. There's a checklist that came out very recently, which is from Third Millennium Classrooms, Campus SAVE Act Compliance Checklist. That just happens to be the most current one that I've printed and have among the many pile of checklists that I have.
And that is in the Dropbox as well.
And we're also, Willamette University has stood on the shoulders of other institutions who have looked at their investigation and conduct processes, and we've done our best to incorporate something that works for Willamette. The dynamic at play is that even as we struggle for that vector of competence, there is no one right way to do these processes, to investigate or to adjudicate. There are multiple ways, and when this document is from, the Association of Student Conduct Administrator 2014 white paper, came out very recently. It's for resolution of allegation of sexual misconduct. This is from page 12, this graph about resolution models, and I was struck when this came out in the white paper that it looked like the beautiful professional version of a whole lot of charts that Liz and I and others had made at Willamette a year ago, with us trying to figure out what the heck should we be doing at Willamette to do this right. And if you look across the top, there are institutions that may take an investigative approach where an investigator or investigators have the responsibility to investigate, review, gather the evidence, and make a determination. Our institution and our folks, we wanted more protections to ensure against bias, and to have eyes looking at the case and to ensure people were being treated fairly, even as we wanted to be respectful at our small institution to minimize the number of people who were aware of situations. There are administrative hearings, administrative panels, and we have landed over there on the far end with a hybrid model. And so we have a full-time investigator who partners with one of those 60 people who are trained to investigate, and that helps us with sex and gender balance and other aspects of providing a safe, comfortable environment for all the individuals involved. And that I can tell you, just for me personally, I am so relieved to see us move to the place where we do not have 18, 19, 20-year-old folks trying to present their own case and do their own investigations, and to potentially risk being perceived as being retaliatory as they ask their friends for text messages or Facebook posts or photographs or letters or notes, and that we have an investigative team looking into that neutrally and in an unbiased fashion to collect as much information as possible. I also think that this dynamic really challenges some of our perceptions where we still continue to see we just lean accidentally into adversarial positions, and even the language of using claimant and respondent lead us to challenges when those dynamics are in policy without additional clarification. That if we have a situation where we have a concern for safety of an individual or the community, but that person who experienced the potential harm or the alleged harm or the harm does not want to move forward with a case, and calling them a claimant, calling that person a claimant, and that a definition of a claimant would be a person who's bringing forth a charge by its very nature is not accurate. And so those are aspects of the university taking on the responsibility, because we have a vested interest in protecting our community and doing our very best job to find the truth. And that all falls within the investigation part of the process. There are certainly institutions that are doing investigation within the hearing process, and I know that people who are engaging in that are trying very hard to be fair and to help support the students. It is a monumental task to wrangle that and to herd the cats, and then to be able to pursue evidence and information that comes up in the hearing. And it is so much better to have that known up front and have many fewer surprises when it comes to the time of the hearing. Some general pieces of both investigation and hearing processes is for very obvious reasons. We're required that anyone who's helping with these processes are trained on a yearly basis, that there is a great deal of information to understand and know, particularly when it comes to dating or domestic partner violence or power-based personal violence. Those cases many times end up with students engaged in behaviors where we have deep concern, but the person who may be experiencing the behavior in no way wants to hold the other individual accountable. And that you may very well have a hearing moving forward where two individuals are actually saying, no, we don't want to have this happen, and that they are actively not wanting to be a part of that process. And this leads me to an aspect of every opportunity we have where we're interacting with students in whatever capacity, and in some cases their families and their people who are supporting them, that the higher the level of care and our ability for our students to know that even if they are incredibly unhappy with what is happening, that we truly have a best interest at heart, and that we have a genuine concern for safety and impact. Students who feel they are treated disrespectfully are going to be much more likely to want to litigate. And we have at Willamette even had students, respondents in cases, say, although they are unhappy with the outcome, they've felt that they were treated fairly. And honestly, in these kinds of cases, that's probably about as good as you can get. Mm-hmm. Some other aspects of just the incredible administrative tasks that fall on folks who are engaged in these processes. The notice, the equal and equitable notices aspect. And I've heard folks fret even over parts of how do we notify claimants and respondents simultaneously. That there has to be a common sense function of us doing that as best we can. And you know, just like in the construction of any policy, these policies and laws are being developed because there clearly have been times where a claimant may not have been notified at all. And so that having these occur in close time proximity is what the intent is. At Willamette, we do use email. And we most likely will be shifting to a more protected form of email within a conduct module to notify claimants and respondents simultaneously, literally. And that is one way to do it. Also, when we have our hearings, we ask our students who are involved directly, claimants and respondents, if they would like to receive notice in some way other than the formal written notice. If they would like to receive a phone call to be able to have a conversation, or if they'd like to receive a text message before the formal notification goes out so that they can be ready for whatever that response is in that letter. And those particular aspects of tailoring and being humane are the pieces that I believe change these procedures from checklists and boxes to check to processes that care about the individuals who are involved, regardless of what the outcome is.
So as you think about all of these things that we've just thrown a whole lot of information at you, and there's a great deal of information within the Dropbox as well, I want you to start thinking about where your institution actually stands when it comes to compliance with all these different regulations. And if we were sitting in a room together, I would actually have you turn to a partner and I would share one of the checklists with you and have you start talking about these things, thinking about where your areas of strength are, thinking about some of the areas of concern you might think about when you think about your own institution. You need to start thinking about what the role residence life plays on your campus and whether it plays any role on your campus. I imagine that it plays some sort of a role on most of our campuses, but it's important to think strategically about what you want that to be for your campus, and what it's currently playing and what it might be in the future. And I like to think about this kind of from a triage standpoint, if any of you are familiar with that you start where you're standing and you think about those things. when in triage terms, the walking wounded, those green tags that you ask those folks that are okay to walk towards you to walk towards your voice. And those are the things that you're probably not going to be paying attention to at this very moment, that those things that are working functionally, that you're up to speed and meeting those minimum requirements right now. You may come back to those after you've got everything else figured out, that you could come back and polish some of those things. But those are the things that you're not going to be paying attention to immediately. Then you're going to have those low-hanging fruit, those yellow tags that you might have on your campuses, those things that would be fairly easy for you to be able to fix in order to make you in compliance with what you're supposed to be doing at this point. And those are some things that you can have as some quick wins on your institution's campus. And those red things are going to be those things that are going to be really difficult for you to be engaging in conversations about in order to make those improvements and changes on your campuses, but those are things that are critical that you're paying attention to. So maybe you're one of those 40% of institutions that aren't submitting your CLERY statistics to the federal government. Maybe you don't have a online anonymous reporting forum yet on your campus, and that can be a political landmine for you to be stepping into, but it's also a piece that you need to be engaging in order to be in compliance. And so some of those things are going to be harder to engage in, but they're things that we all need to be working towards as campuses. I do want to spend this last 15 minutes of our time together answering any questions that you might have. So if you have any questions that have come up for you, feel free to type them into the chat box. And at the top of your screen, there should be a little bubble, like in the comics. There's a little talking bubble, so you can go ahead and click on that. And you can type in any questions, and Lori and I will do our best to field any questions that you might have. And while we ask for questions to come in, we do have the digital Dropbox link at the bottom of your screen. And if you email me at etrayner@willamette.edu, I can go ahead and give you direct access to the digital Dropbox as well. Alex Peterson from OSU has asked if the PowerPoint is in the Dropbox as well, and yes, it is. In addition to the PowerPoint that I utilized, I did a similar presentation recently at a Hawaii, and so that PowerPoint is also available in the Dropbox, in addition to any material that we referenced throughout and a great deal of other material, maybe more information than you ever wanted to have access to. You're welcome, Alex. Any other questions that are out there?
Great. Well, it looks like we might be wrapped up here in terms of questions. Of course, the chat box will be open for a few more minutes, so if anybody does have any, feel free to post them up in there. I want to say thank you very much on behalf of the association to Elizabeth and Lori. That was an excellent presentation, and we really appreciate you taking the time to deliver our first Friday webinar. No doubt everybody got a lot out of it, and thanks very much. Hope everybody enjoys the weekend.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.